Good afternoon. My name is Stanley Okoro. I'm plastic surgeon in Atlanta. I'm one of the hosts for this ANPA webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about the business of medicine, starting and running your practice as a business. Dr. Susan Odienwe is my co-host. She will be joining us shortly. I don't know if our national president is online yet, Dr. Chris. While we wait for him, ANPA is a 501c corporation that represents over 5,000 physicians, dentists, and allied health professionals of Nigerian birth, ethnicity, and friends of Nigeria. We have many membership benefits, including professional development, leadership opportunities, practice referrals, networking, supports in times of need, and joy. And we also run medical missions and volunteerism. Many of the other things that we offer can be found on our website, anpa.org. And I also know that Susan is probably not joined yet. She's traveling. But Susan is the chair of the ANPA membership committee. ANPA can be followed on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. We also have an e-group for members, and most of the information can be found also on our website at anpa.org. This webinar is, today's our number 18th webinar. It's the first Saturday of every month consistently, starts at 12 noon exactly. We believe is this the highest and best use of your time? And is this an intentional aggregation of subject matter experts? And it's free to ANPA members. The next thing is the disclaimer: the materials that are presented at all ANPA webinar is for general educational information purpose only, and is solely the opinion of the presenter. No webinar is intended to provide personalized financial or legal advice. It is left to the discretion and judgment and is the sole responsibility of each attendee to determine what is necessary for his or her own practice. Neither the speakers or ANPA can be held liable, responsible for the materials, opinions, or inadvertent errors or omissions in the presentation and the preparation of the materials. Furthermore, nothing in the material should be construed as an endorsement by ANPA. Today's webinar is being sponsored and presented by WebRx, who's no stranger. Everybody knows who Enyi is. Enyi Kanu is the founder and is chief investment officer for WebRx. He's well known to ANPA. He's a friend of ANPA. He's been assisting and providing tremendous value to ANPA since last year. And he's been on most of the other webinar, and he needs no introduction. Enyi, are you ready to roll?
Thank you, Stanley. Thank you very much. How do you build wealth? You build wealth by being in control of your cash flow and directing it where you want it to go to be productive. You build wealth by minimizing taxes. You build wealth by using leverage. You build wealth by owning, ownership, equity, owning appreciating assets, owning real estate, owning a business or businesses. Welcome to the business of medicine. Starting, running, and growing a private or group practice. I am very excited about what our panelists will share with you today, especially in this day and age when it appears that younger physicians prefer to be employees rather than business owners. And some successful business owners, like my friend Dr. Julius Padua would put it, his why is being your own boss, or one of his whys. We have 4 exceptional panelists who are currently in, have grown, sold, or merged their private or group practices. We have on our panel today over 1 century of medical practice, business practice experience, and so on to share and learn from. We have Dr. Julius Padua, an OBGYN in California, who runs a vertically integrated practice with his pediatrician wife, Dr. Stella Padua. Julius takes care of the mother through delivery. Stella takes over, nurturing the child through adolescence. We have Dr. Nena Aguacha, who's a radiologist who will share her own perspective in private practice. We have Dr. Josephine Okwechime, who's a dermatologist. And we have Dr. Joe Hackworth, a cardiologist. Finally, we will have Dr. Otegbeye, Dr. O as he is called, share perspective, a quick case study about Nightlight Pediatrics, the formation, the growth, and the lessons they've learned. So I'm going to call on Julius to start the conversation with his why, his lessons, and so on. I'd also like input from his wife on what it's like working with your spouse and the experiences and lessons learned. Julius?
Amy, thank you so much. Just a minute. I can't take that. Okay. I really want to say good morning to everybody on the panel, Stanley and others. This is a very good opportunity to at least share one's experience of medical practice in the United States of America. Actually, I have been in the practice of obstetrics and gynecology now for more than 35 years. And it's been quite an experience. I'm closer to the retirement phase of my profession. I'm going to give just a very brief chronological presentation of how all this got started. After my graduation at Howard University Medical School, I went on to do my residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Kings County / Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. I was there for 4 years. And in 1983, I finished my residency. Then the question was, what do I do? Do I start a practice or do I join a medical group? I consulted with some friends. I told them that my ultimate goal was to go back to Nigeria and practice medicine in Nigeria. I talked to my dad. My dad said Nigeria really wasn't a good place at that time because of all the coups that were happening, and that I should stay on at least for some time and reevaluate my intention at a later time. So after finishing the residency at downstate, I joined a New York medical group and practiced with that group for about 6 months. I always knew that uh, the weather in New York wasn't very conducive to an African or Nigerian like me. And because of all the snow, and you have to shovel the snow and other things. So I started looking into moving to California. I came to California in December of '83, did a couple of interviews with the medical groups, HMOs, Cigna was one of them. Went back to, but what they were going to pay me at that time was very, very low. So I went back to New York and started thinking about what do I do? Do I stay in New York where I was going to be paid more? Or do I, because of the weather, move to California? Then the individual that interviewed me at Cigna happened to be a Jamaican who actually graduated from, did his residency in New York. So he kept calling me and told me that I should come over to California. I would like it, and the pay would be better. So I took another trip to California, and Cigna provided a limo from the airport to the hotel where I was going to be staying. I mean, they kind of made it so pleasing. So I went for the second interview, and then I decided to join Cigna. That's how I moved to California in January of 1984. I started working for Cigna Health Plan. It was good. I was there for a year. And after that, then I had this itch for my own medical practice. But I still needed a little bit of time to study the environment in California and see where I will really be. So after a year with Cigna, I moved over to South Los Angeles and joined another medical group for another year. Then I said, no, this is it. I'm now going to go into medical practice on my own. And so I chose an area, which is the area which I'm in now, in '87, and started medical practice. It wasn't easy. It was especially in that area. I was the first Black physician to be in the area, but the practice started well. And my wife, I just got married at that time, and she did her medical school in Nigeria at UNN, and then came over to do her residency training in California. So while I was in the practice of obstetrics, she was in the residency program doing pediatrics. And then things changed in California. I think California was probably the first state to go into health maintenance organizations, HMOs, which is really, really entrenched in California. And I don't know about the other parts of the United States. But it just so happened that for you to be successful in medical practice, you have to have an affiliation with multiple HMOs. Luckily, the hospital that I was practicing at that time decided to help a few of us to form a medical group that will now affiliate with some HMOs. And that is really the success of my medical practice. That was really the success of my medical practice. So we formed a medical group, multi-specialty, and then we now had contracts with some major HMOs in California. I was the medical director for the medical group, and I was on the board of directors, and we were now guaranteed patients. If you come to California and you do not uh, uh, join any medical group that has multiple affiliations with HMOs, you're not going to have a successful practice. That is the basis of the success of our practice. And then luckily for me, my wife was a pediatrician, like Aye had indicated. She's a pediatrician and I'm in obstetrics and gynecology. So we combined both under one roof. And it was really, 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 really good. So having access to multiple HMOs with our medical group, we didn't have to go and look for patients. They just referred patients to us. And that made it very easy. So if you are coming into medical practice in California today and you do not have access to these medical groups where you can be guaranteed to have patients, you're not going to be successful. And I really can't tell exactly what it is in Georgia, in Atlanta, where Stanley is, and in other parts. But that has been the success of medical practice in California. Now, the question is, I know Inyi did hint on at least my feeling that it's better for you to be your own boss. But Inyi told me last night that you're not really your own boss. Your patients are really your boss, which is true. But at least I won't have somebody like Stanley Okoro telling me that you have to be at the office at 9 o'clock and then you have to be there till about 6. And I can take off at any time due to my own choice. But there are ups and downs in every aspect of life. Being in your own practice really means that your time is not guaranteed for you. You're on call 24 hours, 7 days. And that's what I've been doing for the last 35 years. And it hasn't been easy. It definitely would have been much easier if I joined the medical group and I'm on call once every 7 days or something like that. But the downside is I think financially one has done much better with one's own medical practice. And so this is a choice that our new physicians will have to make. Do they want the quality of life to be the main object of their professional life? Or do they want to control their own destiny and probably maybe do much better financially than they would have if they had worked for a medical group? So I will end it here, and I will be ready to answer any questions from anybody so that we can elaborate more on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Barua, for the good comments. We're going to have the questions at the end, Dr. Barua. So I'm going to encourage the panelists to keep their comments as much as short as possible. But at the end, we're going to have plenty of time to ask each of the panelists questions. And also, if you feel like asking your own questions, you will have the opportunity to do that, or you can also send the questions by the
by the chat.
by the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if any you want to introduce Dr. The next
Sure.
panelist? Okay.
What we're going to do as we go forward is I'm going to ask a question and have each of you answer the question. And in answering the question, hopefully that's going to provide additional insight. Julius did a terrific job in giving background to how he landed in his private practice and the motivations and the rewards. One of the great things about this country is it allows you and affords you the benefit of being in business more than anything else. Dr. Josephine Okwechime is a dermatologist. And I'm going to ask you the first question, which is, why did you go into private practice? You heard why Dr. Julius Padua went into private practice. Can you tell us in a couple of minutes your why for going into private practice?
You are muted right now. So
go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm Josephine Okochimi. I practice in Kokomo, Indiana. I used to be an internist. And as an internist, I worked for different organizations. Then I decided to go back and achieve my dream of being a dermatologist. So I'd go back into residency and do another 3 years. My first job was in a hospital. And you took a lot of orders from people who were not even doctors. And they want to tell you how to practice medicine, and you have to be in at a certain time. There was a time I even wanted to go to Nigeria on vacation, and they had to give me a meeting because they said I could only take 1 week. And I said, even the journey alone is almost 2-3 days, depending on what airline you fly. So it was impossible. And they had this spiel about closing my practice while I'm not there, they won't make money, blah, blah, blah. So it was really stressful, and I was putting in a lot of hours. And for what we do, as you know, all doctors I know, even after a day's work, when they get home, they are still doing the business of medicine. It never ends. You're doing charts, you're calling patients, you're telling them results, even at weekends. And it's so much. And then with everybody telling you what to do, even the insurance companies, I started thinking, I think it might be best if I looked at the option of working for myself. I can work just as hard and make the money for myself. And so I started looking into it. The CEO I had was very good, but then he left. A new guy came from California. He said he was going to drop our pay. And I'm like, what? And so that was it for me. After that, I decided, no, I'm going to look into private practice. And so that's how I decided to go into private practice. And I have to say, it's very rewarding financially than working for the hospital or an organization, but it also is challenging. It's a lot of work, especially if you're the only doctor. And you wear many hats. You're not just the doctor. You are the sole administrator of your practice. You may have an office manager, but you have to look into it as well. You have to control your money. You have to look at spending, waste. As a solo practitioner, you want to buy things at the cheapest rate you can get, because if you overspend, then you're not really going to be saving money. So money is really important. Has it been rewarding? Yes, like I said, great. But there are challenges, especially I think a lot more maybe for female business owners, because you're not just a doctor, you are a wife, you are a mom. You still got to provide hot meals for your husband. You're not going to say, well, I'm a doctor, I can't cook for you. Of course, if you do that, your marriage is going to break. And so sometimes I get home at 8 and I got to take off my shoes, take off everything, and I'm making dinner for my husband. And then my kids are wanting to eat as well. So it's not easy, it's difficult, but you just learn to adjust. And I would say that it's been good so far. You deal with a lot of employee issues. I think employees are the biggest problem in running a practice. And I'm sure Dr. Padua may agree with me. Um, your office manager can deal with that, but there are just some things they won't be able to deal with. You have people coming and going, people not showing up for work. Like right now, people are getting stimulus money, so they don't want to work. It's tough. And even as a doctor, sometimes I do make beds in my office. If I'm short and I only have one MA when I should have three, I have to help her. Because if you don't, they will quit. So you don't want to overwork the good staff that you have. And sometimes, you in between patients, I remove my doctor hat and I'm an MA. Sometimes I scribe for myself when I'm short, just so they're not overloaded. So I just want to tell you the other side, that it's not easy. You have to be willing to work. And sometimes it's just hard. But there are very good days, like I can take off for 3 weeks, which I do at the beginning of every year, which I could not do when I worked for people. They tell me how many days to take, when I have to be back, and stuff like that, which I hated, having a conversation of why I can only take a week at a time. You can take as long as you want. You may just earn less money during that period, but I still get paid when I'm on holiday. And I can decide how many patients I want to see. And if a friend has a function, I want to go help them, I can tell my staff, cancel next week, Tuesday, I'm not coming. And so that's the beauty of private practice. You control your time. And I've thought about selling my practice several times. I've had people wanting to buy it, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And at the last minute, I always back out because I remember the great advantages. And my husband always tells me, think about it really well. The people trying to buy you are not interested in you. They're interested in the finances of your business. You've worked so hard to bring it to this level. Are you really sure you want to sell? And when I think about going back working for someone, I always decide, nah, I don't think that's a good idea. So I've stayed there. It's rewarding. I'm happy with it, but there are a lot of challenges, I have to say as well, which you can overcome. They're not things that you cannot overcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Okwechime. You touched on something very briefly that I will ask Dr. Agwocha to actually expand on. I think one common theme here is control, independence and control. Dr. Agwocha, a female radiologist, is in practice herself. Can you talk about how being a female physician has affected your career and your being in private practice?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I am a board certified radiologist. I've been in practice now for about 7 years. I did medical school here in Atlanta at Emory, did my residency here at Emory, and then did my fellowship at Johns Hopkins. I think Dr. Badua touched upon knowing your why. And my why is the reason why I went into radiology in the first place, because I had sacrificed so much of my 20s to medicine and to training. And I wanted to have work-life balance, which is why I chose the field that I chose, which is why I went into radiology. Radiology was the thing that I could see myself doing long-term and not getting burnt out. Back in those days, it was a lifestyle field. It still is to a certain extent, but it's busier now than it was back then. And also because I had a mentor, or I knew of somebody back then when I was in training, when I was in residency, who had a great schedule. She was a mom, she worked at home, and she was working 1 week on, 2 weeks off. And I said, that's the life I want to live. So how do I achieve that? When I came out of practice, I did your standard radiology job, which is you're working 12, 14 hours a day, sometimes 14, 12, sometimes 2 weeks in a row. I was up in Connecticut at that time, and my group in Connecticut was covering multiple practices. So we had multiple hospitals. We had hospitals in New York, we had hospitals in Rhode Island, we had hospitals in Boston, and we had hospitals in Massachusetts. So I was commuting over 100 miles to work back and forth. My fiance at the time was an orthopedic surgeon, and the time it just was not working out. Fortunately, I was laid off from that job. I did not see it as a blessing at that time, but it was a blessing in disguise. I was laid off from that job because they lost their hospital contract. And I decided to use it as an opportunity to really craft the life that I wanted to live on my own terms. At the time that I was laid off, everything kind of fell apart at the same time. Home, job, relationship, everything fell down. And it gave me an opportunity to really sit and think about what was really important to me. Do I want to spend the next 30 to 40 years of my life commuting 100 miles to work, working 12, 14 hours a day and not having time for my children? Or do I want to have an opportunity to do a field that I love and also have a decent life and also have the opportunity to raise my children? I ended up getting another job in Connecticut, and that was during the economic crisis. That job wasn't paying me what I deserved to be paid. And I didn't want to stay in Connecticut anymore because, of course, the weather wasn't suitable. I wanted to come back down to Atlanta. So I negotiated with that practice to move me down to Atlanta so that I could work from home and still work from them. And I took a pay cut in order to have that position and in order to be able to work from the place that I wanted to work from. And from that job, I worked 1 week on, 1 week off. It still wasn't ideal for me salary-wise. And when the opportunity came, I saw my current job come up and I jumped ship. So in my current position, I work for a group in Alabama, and I'm an ER radiologist. So I work for a level 1 trauma center. So I do strokes, high level 1 MVAs, you name it. I read everything. And the thing that I really, really love about my job is my schedule. So I work 1 week off, 1 week on, 2 weeks off. I'm somebody that loves to travel. So when I'm not working, I'm all over the world. Pre-COVID, I visited 8 countries in 8 months. Pre-COVID, 5 of those countries were on the continent in Africa. 3 of those countries were elsewhere. And the reason why I chose my job and the reason why I chose my particular schedule is that I looked ahead to the future, to when I started having my kids. And once I have a family, I want to be able to see my kids and I want to be able to spend time with my kids and also to do other things that I love. For me, radiology is what I do for a living. It's not who I am. I don't feel defined by what I do for a living. So it was really important for me to have work-life balance. So as a woman, as you said, it was important for me to have a job in a position where I could have work-life balance. And that was my why. That was why I chose my particular field and my scope of practice.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
That insight is very helpful. I'm going to go to Dr. Joe Hackworth. Joe is an interventional cardiologist, and he's in Cincinnati here. Full disclosure, he is my family cardiologist, my parents, myself, etc. Joe was part owner of one of the largest cardiology practices in the greater Cincinnati area. And somewhere in that process, they merged or sold their practice. Joe, I want you to share some insight and advice, your experience as a cardiologist in private practice. I know that in conversations with you, one of the things you said that was profound for me was you guys were always wondering what they were going to do next to you, what they were going to come up with again. And I don't know how many of you in private practice going to have that perspective. Joe, let me have you talk a little bit about your specialty group practice and why and how you guys kind of moved in the direction that you did successfully too, by the way.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be very quick and succinct. When I finished, I've been in practice for a long time, 41 years actually. And when I finished my cardiology fellowship, I went into practice and solo practice. And then within a month or two or three, one of my Jewish fellows who trained with me said, "Can I join you?" So we joined up and we created two. And then next year, a third. And then we grew to 14 guys. And early on, I was doing most of the business piece of the practice. And then after time went by, we were able to afford a business manager. We made life a lot easier to deal with the hiring and firing of people. And then we eventually grew to 14 people. We built our own cardiac cath lab. And what India is talking about was the CMS decided that they weren't going to pay us. They weren't going to reimburse us for doing cardiac caths in our own private lab. But they come in August and made it retroactive to January. So you never know what they're going to do to you or against you or whatever. So we were in a position where we were paying more to do a cardiac cath than we were getting reimbursed. So we finally sold out the cath lab to the hospital, who came in and got it on the cheap. But so eventually we grew to 15 guys, and we practiced in Cincinnati, which is at the Ohio River. And then part of our guys were in Kentucky. And then one of the Kentucky hospitals came to our group and said, "We like you guys, we like your cohesiveness. We want to hire your guys. We want to buy your practice and have you practice out of our hospital." So we took a vote and decided to sell to the hospital, and we became owned by the hospital system. And so that's how, so I've been on the side of owning my own practice, being independent, being able to do what we do, to now that I'm a kept man, so to speak. And so there are trials and tribulations on both sides of that equation. And we get to where we think about the practice of hiring people, firing people, making sure someone shows up to work. So now that I'm owned by the system, I don't worry about that. All I got to do is go in and do my productivity. We were able to negotiate we have 13 weeks of vacation per year, which means that every week I get a vacation. And I like to travel as well. In fact, I was just coming back from Antarctica when the COVID pandemic hit last January. So we do those kinds of things. So in practice, we work for the system. We are owned by the system. Bureaucracy. The system has so much bureaucracy. You can't get things done. And it's very, very challenging. And so you try to move this or try to move that. And then again, you work for them. So they tell you when to go, where to go, whatever. So it's an uncomfortable compromise sometimes to be employed. In my area, Cincinnati, I know that every physician is owned by a system in some way or another. Primary care, cardiologist, whatever. I happen to be an interventional cardiologist, which means that we cover the hospital 24/7, 365. Someone has to be in-house cardiologist all the time. So I take my turn to do that. And so I have to reconcile being away with my partners who are covering when I'm not there. So it all works out really pretty well at this point in time, given what I do. So I don't know if that answers your question, Andy, but was there another question in there?
No, you did answer the question, Joe. Thank you.
Andy, before you bring the pediatric group, I wanted to, there are two people that I was looking to ask a quick question, like a hot type question is, one of them has an international practice and one of them is a young physician who just started practicing less than 2 years ago. I just kind of want her to share what she's been through, and I wanted him to share what it is to have a practice in both continents. And in the interest of time, I just want to I know we have a case study for the nightlife pediatrics, but I would want to Dr. Dr. Ahamoyike to kind of give us a quick nugget about practicing in both countries, which I do myself, but this is not about me.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, the opportunity. I commend you, Stanley, and the rest of the organizers. Very quickly, I'll say that there is money everywhere. There's opportunity everywhere. There's some instability in Nigeria, which is concerning, but there's still a tremendous business opportunity. I've been fortunate to be in a position to, I guess, exploit, maybe not the best word, but take advantage of my training in orthopedics, which presents ubiquitous problems in any community, and figure out ways to navigate that on both ends. Annie's introduction is figuring out your leverage, figuring out how to create wealth. And I think I've found that there are some regulatory restrictions in the United States that preclude us from fully taking advantage of our opportunities. For instance, what we have in Nigeria is a hospital, it's a small hospital. We call it a boutique hospital. Regulations will not allow me to do the same here in Washington, D.C., even though I will argue that it is a superior model of delivery of care to my patients. I just simply cannot do that. I cannot own an MRI. There's some limitations on being able to own physical therapy, all of which are market opportunities for orthopedic surgeons. I'll say one last thing. There was a time when I had a patient come from Jamaica for a knee replacement surgery. And at the end of the day, the total amount of money transferred, mostly through him and his family's contributions, including credit cards, to the healthcare system was about $35,000. And my own compensation as the person who did the surgery and who brought him to the States was about $1,800. Conversely, I've had people in Nigeria pay roughly $7,000, and my own personal compensation will surpass that 1,800 from somebody who paid 35. So putting all of that in context, trying to see where the money is and how to follow the money, and creating opportunities to take advantage of our skill set has allowed me to have practices here in the United States as well as in Nigeria. I'll end there. Thanks again, Stanley.
Thank you, Aham. Tope, can you unmute yourself? Tope is our former chair of ANPA here in Georgia. She is a young rising leader in ANPA, a young physician OBGYN. She's kind of shy, but I want her to share her she's in practice less than 2 years as a private practitioner. Can you tell us about your journey just a little bit?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak very briefly. I am in an airport right now, so hopefully we don't get interrupted. I've been in private practice for a little bit, but I was in a situation where there were some pretty disturbing legal issues at a former practice that I was at, and it basically imploded in a very short period of time. And within about 2 to 3 months, I had to find something to do. So I have now been in private practice, my own solo practice, for about 10 months now. And for me, obviously I was forced into it, but the payoff, as everybody has echoed, is autonomy. Being able to cut through a lot of red tape that normally you would have to do when you are employed. The challenge really is making sure you are making decisions that are really financially beneficial, and keeping yourself afloat, no matter how altruistic you are. And no matter what you want to give to the community, that's still pretty paramount as a business owner. So really shifting from just being a doctor to a business owner has probably been the biggest challenge. And being able to get the right people on your team, I think is very key when you do something this big. And that's probably been my learning curve. And I am here to learn more from all the people who have been here and doing it for a while.
Thank you, Tope. Enyi.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much, for sharing your experience as it is. And you certainly have the community support and well wishes as you continue on this journey. As you've seen, everybody says this is a worthwhile journey. Business ownership is worth it in any environment. Talking about business ownership, we have as a case study, Nightlight Pediatrics. Dr. Otebeye, AKA Dr. O, Dr. Desai, and Dr. Soremi are partners in Nightlight Pediatrics. I asked them to share with us very briefly why they went into the practice, how they grew, and what's been the secret to their success. I'll tell you, they've done a terrific job in building a successful practice, group practice. So I'm going to let you take it away, Dr. O, or any of you.
Hi all. Appreciate you all giving us the opportunity. I actually think it's a great privilege to be able to share this. And I'm going to make it brief and try to be to the point. But first, I don't know if I can share my screen. Can I share my screen, Dr. Okoro? Or I should just go ahead and talk? Okay.
You can share your screen, but just keep it short.
Okay, I will.
Hold on, let me make sure you can. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to try to make it short. So these are we are three partners. We are all both certified in pediatric intensive care. This slide is dated. Together, we have over 100 years of experience in clinical practice. I came to Orlando in 1990, recruited to help build a pediatric ICU at Florida Hospital with the hope of making it a children's hospital. And it was also in private practice with someone. Dr. Desai joined us 2 years later in that group. And after 3 years, I decided to leave and start my own practice, basically because as a partner, I didn't feel like I was a partner in the group. So the person I joined was running it, and the office manager was the second partner. And even though I was made, so the lesson of that really in practice for those, and I think that's why some people may like solo practice or be shy of being in partnership. But I do think the partnership is always like a marriage, and we have to understand a whole lot of things about who we're going into partnership with. So I really am blessed to have Dr. Desai and I have been together now for we did fellowship together, but in practice together for at least going on 30 years, and Dr. Shuremi for 20. We all have to decide at some point in time, and it has to be dynamic. Work-life balance may play a role initially, autonomy may play a role, but as we age, exit becomes a factor, and the number of, and also in growing a practice, the critical mass of people that are needed. One may have all the knowledge, but there's only 24 hours a day. So the critical mass needed to achieve the goal is important. So once we were practicing at Florida Hospital we as intensivists and hospitalists, we saw a pain point in care of kids. And so the next lesson learned for is going into private practice or staying successful in private practice requires, like any business, having a unique selling proposition. And that selling proposition may change from time to time. And trying to figure out a market dominating position that one can have and present a solution. Our goal has never been to just compete. Our goal has been to address all those three areas and present a unique selling proposition, whether it's to the insurance company, to the patient, or to our referring PCPs. So our mission come 2014, we left the hospital and we felt that kids coming to the emergency room and spending 4 to 6 hours before they get to us, or even when we are consulted, we can't even get to see them, was a pain point in the care. And we decided to trial doing it outpatient at a higher level than a mom and pop urgent care. So we opened a trial. We couldn't call it emergency room because of the regulatory headaches. We still called it urgent care, but we did it at a very high level. And it succeeded, and we figured out that this has legs. We grew it to 3, and then we moved from there. And by the time we got to 3, we decided ICU is really not worth it for us anymore. We left ICU, and we kept the hospitalist component, but we left the ICU component because it created a better balance and probably significantly better income. And that's why I encourage looking for the pain points and what the patient needs and merging it with work-life balance is always a dynamic process. So after we left the ICU, we created a mission statement, and our mission was to exemplify the best in pediatric practice by delivering excellent and compassionate care. And we always look back at that all the time to and reevaluate. This has been a history briefly. So I came in 1990. We started this trial in 2004, and now we've grown to 13 locations in Florida. We're the biggest pediatric urgent care practice in Florida at the moment. Our goal is to move out of Florida, ultimately probably by in the next few years. But we had to grow it in stages, and this color scheme sort of represents the stages. We grew within Orlando, learning the process. We also decided very early on, and we've grown now with the 13 locations. We have about 28 full-time physicians and another 10 part-timers. But we had to learn there were pitfalls along the way. But we stayed with it. And initially when we started, we figured we didn't have the money or the capital. And in a narrow margin business like pediatrics, procedural businesses generally have a higher margin. But when you're seeing face-to-face, it's narrow margin, and cash flow matters a lot. But regardless of your margin, I think cash flow always matters, and because the bottom line is how much you end up keeping in your pocket. The narrow margin just made us more disciplined. We went out initially and sort of figured out our catchment area is people who are having kids. The second is they have kids and they have to go to work the following day. So our demographic that we had to look at was a little different from the general demographic. And we use Publix as our initial no money. They've done the work, we'll use Publix because moms have to go and buy things in Publix. They take care of their family. So we looked for Publix hub spots, and we tried it like that for probably our first 4. And after we figured out that using Publix alone won't cut this, because 2 were very successful. One was making money and one was barely breaking even. So it was clear to us that Publix alone can be. We went on to develop 20 additional, a total of 20 metrics. We looked at many, up to 40, but we narrowed it down to 20. And each one did not have the same score. But they all added up to 100. And we decided, hey, and if we're looking at a location and it doesn't score 80, we're not going there. We also went back to the 4 that we had opened and used the same metric. And the one that was barely breaking even did not meet 80. So we had to make a decision that at some point we're going to close that and move it. And so that was our initial learning point. We had to create processes, and then we decided we're doctors, we understand an amount of management, but we're not managers. And we went out of to retain a general manager, but we went against the grain because he wasn't a general manager that was in the healthcare field before. He actually was in consumer goods and marketing and worked for Pepsi and Tropicana and Quaker, because we felt that the marketing end of doing a medical business, particularly with low margins, is very important. And he's been with us now for probably 15 years or so. So when we cleaned it up to those 20 metrics, then we then decided to utilize the metrics to test it within Orlando, and it worked. And then we decided, okay, it's time to really test ourselves, because the Orlando market is really unique in the US. We have 3 children's hospitals with a population of 1.5 million people, and the pediatric population is probably less than 500,000. And we were competing with 3 big children's hospitals, and 2 of which had their own urgent cares. And we were still successful, but we figured that we had not unlocked the value yet and wanted to get out of Orlando where there is no competition. So after we cleaned up our process was when we went to this 2015 yellow point. And by 2018, we decided we opened 4 locations. And we also closed the one that didn't meet the metric in Orlando. So that's sort of been a story. We have had to, and I'm going to just show 2 more slides and kind of stop. So our goal, we always have a 3 to 5 year goal. And every time we're close to that 3 to 5 years, we reevaluate and see where we're going. So our goal was to expand across the Southeast, develop double digits profit growth, and score 90%. We are very particular about patient satisfaction as part of our process. So we've computerized every patient at a point where when they come in, it's on a tablet. And when the doctor says you're discharged, it generally takes about 5 minutes for the discharge papers to be ready. We give them a tablet and we tell them to score us in terms of, and they have 10 questions. The score is 1 to 5. And if anybody scores us a 3 or less, the tablet is electronically tied to the server, and the manager on call gets paged. That we call that patient before they leave the office as to what did we do wrong, or how can we do better. First, it allowed them to be more satisfied, and it decreased the number of bad reviews. And the ones that score, say, 5, we're able to say, well, if you really want to review us, we are happy for you to do so, but do the review when you leave our building. The reason why we started doing it when you leave the building is when they do it within your building, Google's smart enough to know the IP address that they are using. And Google's smart enough when they see your IP address, they think you're plagiarizing and creating false reviews, and it doesn't show up. So we were able to do both and continue to increase our market dominance in the area. I'm gonna go, so this is where we are right now, from as far north as Jacksonville to as far south as Port St. Lucie. And you can see this concentrated area is where we did our initial thing to see and clean up our processes. And lastly, our goal ultimately is to be dynamic, is to now be able to sell it to the insurance companies as an ER diversion program. We've been able to prove that it costs less to come to Nightlight than to go to ER and wait in terms of cost. We've been able to show that we can do more and do ER level work. And we're now adapting telemedicine and doing hospital admission prevention for the patients. Our ultimate goal is then to get to the Southeast or maybe to some strategic areas in the United States. Let me stop there. In any business, we have to sort of do the value propositions. And so in my experience, there are 4 components to medicine. One is the insurance company, one is the patient, one is the referring doctors and the hospital. I'm yet to find a scenario where all 4 are happy at the same time. So if you can get 3, you're probably in good shape. So our scenario is deal with the insurance company, you decrease ER visits, lower the overhead, and they save on money. To the members, alternative to the ER for the child. And we open in the evenings. So the mom can bring the kids and on weekends. And we provide the clinical expertise. And then to the referring physicians, we make sure we don't do primary care. So we're not competing with them. We're a complement to their practice. They get whatever we've done faxed to their office by the following morning. So there's practice continuity. And so they're really very eager to work with us. And I will stop there in the interest of time. If there are other questions, I'll be happy to address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. O. My friends, this is exactly why I chose NLP as your case study. This is the business of medicine. It is about differentiating by value propositions, identifying your stakeholders, and making sure that they're integral to your growth and development. If you listened, and I'm sure you did, to his presentation, you saw here very well reasoned, very well planned, very well put together a growth trajectory that's actually supported by expertise in all areas, thinking like a businessman, reasoning that this is a business in that context, putting together the right teams, the right mindset, and the right direction in terms of your goals and so on. These are the kinds of things that happen. So one of the things that he talked about was, I'll point you all to a book. It's called Essentialism by McEwen, Greg McEwen, Essentialism, when he talked about the metrics that they use to disqualify what they're going to do and what they're not going to accept. When you go to the, and use, you know, if you read the book Essentialism, I think you're going to begin to understand and appreciate why it is so important to focus on what's essential. And because that informs and disqualifies everything that's not. What you've seen here is a classic case of business success and potential growth. Hopefully it informs what all of us here continue to do in our walk as private business owners, as private practitioners. I'm going to open it up for questions. Stanley, do you have anything to add? You're muted.
No, thank you, Enyi. I think this is the time that most of us have been waiting for, time for questions. In this webinar, you can ask your own questions, or you could put it on the chat. There are some questions that were already emailed to me prior to this. So any of the, anybody can chime in, including the participants and the panelists. One is, for those who have been in practice for a long time, what is your exit strategy and what would you tell your young self? Dr. Otebo, you're the last person to speak, so.
I can go. I've just like Dr. Hackworth, I've been in practice now 41 years, left University of Ibadan in 1980. There has to be an exit strategy. And I believe that the exit strategy has, just like a will or anything else that there's a plan for, it has to be reviewed, updated, changed. It's a dynamic process. But it becomes even more important as we get older. But that's not to say when we start that it should not be there. And it's a part of medicine that a lot of us don't think about. And particularly if one is in solo practice, but even in a group practice, there's always a buy-sell agreement. So for me, I'm 3 years away from retirement, I think, and that means not doing a whole lot of bedside work, not necessarily drinking tequila in Cancun. But like I'm actually happy to see Dr. Onyike because I see him a lot on Doctors for Change, which is a platform of Nigerians in diaspora, where I haven't seen him virtually before. But that being said, the exit strategy is important. And for people who have a solo mind, I believe that those are the ones that have the biggest challenge when it gets to exit, because everybody has a personality, and planning what to do and what one will do and how one will transition it is important, and being able to monetize it. So how to end let me just stop at that. Mr. Kanu may have more. Exit strategy could include being able to scale it, being able to sell it, being able to replicate it, and so you're not doing the same thing, but there has to be some form of exit that's planned. And like a will or trust, it's important.
Okay, thank you. I will not, there's so many questions. The next one will be, this is for a young practitioner. What should they keep in mind when they're ready to lease a space? What would you, Dr. Padowa, anybody on the panelists or even on the participants, what would you say to your young self if you've been in practice for over 5 or 10 years and somebody is trying, and a young ANPA physician is trying to start a practice? What kind of questions should they be asking in leasing a space, negotiating their lease? These are short nuggets, please.
You know, Stanley, the lease agreement, they are pretty standard. Most of those leases go for about 5 years. So I don't think that that would be any particular problem to an individual who is trying to start a practice, unless your practice is not going to take up to about 5 years, but minimum 5 years, that's what those leases are for. Then the other one would be the price. That's something that you can negotiate, you know, bring the price down. At least if you're starting a new practice, for them to allow you to be established before the full rent is realized.
Yeah, if I can add to that, in starting a practice, as in, and those of you who have been involved and know what we do, it's really, everything is about expertise. You know, expertise is so important. You really need to surround yourself with experts and expertise. There are people who specialize in doing these things. I always tell people, look, focus on what you do best. Find your who's, and surround yourself with those who's. There's a book, Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan. It's really, it speaks to what I'm just talking about. It's a format that really enables you to expand your capabilities. The experts will help you with the lease, with the contracts, with all the different things and so on. They'll help you with whatever planning, buy-sell type agreements, all the aspects of the business that would allow you to practice medicine. Dr. Hackworth talked about when they hired a business manager, how much of a relief it gave them. You know, everybody here that's in private practice, I'm sure, experiences these things. You really need to just surround yourself with the right people to help you with accomplishing these things. Thank you.
If I may chime in for a second, I have to agree with that. I think that you know, in medical school and throughout our training, no one teaches us about the economics of medicine. No one talks about that stuff. And so we get out and we learn by doing. We make mistakes, and I have learned over the years that it's much cheaper, actually, to hire someone and like an ENU or somebody who has the who. That can help us avoid some of those pitfalls that we fall into as, because we're neophytes. We don't know anything about the business world or anything. So don't be cheap and get the person the help that you need to help keep you from getting in trouble down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I read the book, The Who Not How. I highly recommend it. And thanks for recommending it last time. There was another question. Your first year of private practice, what are I guess this is a very big, it's huge. What are the things that you think will make the practice fail the first 2 years? What would you do different? What would you address, talk to your younger self for those who've been in practice for a long time? So that's a big question, but short nuggets for young physicians, please.
This is Deji Otegbe. I'm going to try to be brief. One is you have to plan. Everything requires planning and preparation, and Mr. Kano already alluded to that. You have to understand your market. You have to understand your competition. You have to understand your own value proposition. Don't go into it saying, I want to be, there's a market and I just want to be like the rest. There's enough market for everybody. Always think of what can I do better? What value am I adding to be better than everybody else out there? The second is, in terms of competition, is think of the hospitals if it's hospital related. And lastly, I would say look to get help. And initially the help people you can hire because you're going out and you need cash flow, you need cash to start the business. So you have to get expertise from people who will advise, not necessarily hire you. The help may also not be in Orlando, for instance, there's a small business development corporation and it's been run by UCF, and they do a lot of things that gives you tips. So you need that. Lastly, you need to determine your big insurance players, whether they're Medicaid and do your best to familiarize with their process and be sure that you're at least going to get 3 or 4 big ones before you go out there. But you don't want to expend the money and then you're spending a year to get contracts. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Please go ahead.
Okay. I think one of the big things as well is honesty. If you're not honest, you will go under. So honesty is very, very key. I believe that you have to be honest with your patients. For example, I remove skin cancers and stuff. So if there's a skin cancer, you don't necessarily want to go the way that you're going to make the most money. Surgery is obviously the way. So if there are other options to treat the cancer that's cheaper, I give those options to them and explain advantages and disadvantages and let them choose. Also, the insurance will come after you if you cheat. So that sometimes your staff is going to document wrongly and you get paid for what you did not do. And so when you find those things, you want to return the money before they ask you. And there are going to be audits. You also want to document properly because that's going to come and save you later. If you don't document properly and you charge a high level and they come after you for audit and want their money back, they're going to need your charts. And if you document properly, then they say, oh, well, you made the criteria. So honesty, both to your patients and to insurance companies, truth, very important. You also want to communicate effectively with your patients. Patients are cool with anything you do as long as they know and they've been told. But you can't just do things, maybe something different when they were expecting something else that you failed to explain. So I just find that good communication, honesty, don't cheat. And when you get money that's not yours, don't say it's God's blessings. God's not going to bless you with fraudulent money. I hear people say that it's not God's blessings, give it back. And so if you try to keep money that's not yours, very soon they'll find out and you'll go on that. So you got to stay honest and truthful.
Thank you very much. And the last question that was emailed to me is also a big one. Hold on, Enyi, hold on.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
This one is about hospital employees versus private practice. Can somebody comment on, I think Dr. Badowa or somebody was in private practice, went to a hospital, and somebody went from hospital to private employees, pros and cons. If we can, I would like to keep this short, boom, 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 in interest of time. I want somebody to address the pros and somebody can address the cons and vice versa. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in on that, pros and cons. I was in private practice for many years with a group, and then we got bought out by the hospitals. Pros are that you have options. You can make your own decisions and you control your destiny to some extent. However, you are still subject, in my practice as an interventional cardiologist, our biggest payers was the government. That's Medicare and Medicaid, because we deal with older people doing procedures and stuff. And so they call the shots and they make the rules, and sometimes make the rules after the fact. So the pros of being employed is that I don't have to worry about people showing up to work. I don't have to worry about hiring people, firing people, making sure the electricity is going to be on tomorrow or paying the rent. It happens. The system pays for that. They pay me a salary. The cons of that is that I have no control over what's happening. They determine where we're going to go and how we're going to do it.
Thank you. Who can address another pros and cons? Anybody?
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, Dr. Tegbe, go ahead.
No.
Gertie, please go ahead, Gertie.
I was just gonna chime in. Very great conversation, great panelists. This is wonderful. I've been in private practice for about 13 years. I was employed when I first finished a fellowship, um, working for the Baton Rouge General in Baton Rouge. So I think the pros and cons of employed position and being a private practitioner yourself just depends on what are your goals. For some people, the lifestyle that you want and where you are in life at that time may work for you to be employed. You don't have to worry about all the background things, who's hiring, who's firing, like Dr. Hackworth was saying. You just show up at work, do your work, they pay you at the end of the day, and that's it. And if it works for you, that's fine. Some people, just depending on where you are in life. At the time I was hired, my kids were very young. And we all know that as mothers, we also have to be the wives and run the family and take care of the children. So what do you want I'm now talking as a mother. What do you want as a mother? If you want that lifestyle balance that everybody has been talking about, then you may want to consider putting your family at the forefront. If your family is at the forefront, then every decision you make should come from there. And that's where a lot of the advantages of being in private practice will come from. So again, I say this to say that everybody has where they are in life at that time. For somebody like me, I have seen so many advantages being in private practice that my youngest is in early college right now. And I thought that when I went into private practice, I thought once she gets to college, I may leave private practice. But now I'm beginning to rethink that just because of the other factors that are involved being a private practitioner. That's just what I'm going to add. Thank you all for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Two quick things. I wanted to ask two people who are on this call. One is Dr. Stella Padua, who is a pediatrician married to Dr. Julius Padua. If she can share with us what the experience has been like working with her spouse. The other one is Dr. Achoy Merowa. Dr. Achoy also has a multidisciplinary practice. I think it'll be insightful to kind of hear very briefly his perspective on, again, multi is the emphasis there. When you heard from Nightline, what you found out was this is a focused specialty practice. I'd like the two of them to talk about that and then we can wrap it up. So Stella, can you go and then Dr. Achoy will follow.
Is she muted?
I don't think she's on the line.
Okay, I saw her earlier.
Okay.
Okay, I know you can't speak for her, so okay.
Don't put him in trouble, please.
Okay, Achoy.
Yeah, Enyi, thank you for asking me to speak, and thanks for a wonderful panel. And I think it's been a very excellent presentation. Different people from different perspectives. My own model has to do with providing as much services as we can for the individual patient that came to us. So we started as an OBGYN practice, and I've said this in my last presentation. Shegu Salako asked me, you're doing about 100 deliveries a month. At that time, we were 4 OBGYNs. Why don't you have a pediatric practice? And I said, well, I'm not a pediatrician, but let's make a long story short. I think we now have added pediatrics. And then having added pediatrics, these women that come to us, when we say, who's your primary care doctor? They say, well, you. I said, no, I don't get paid as your primary care doctor. So because of that, we added primary care. So essentially, we were doing the work, and as Badua has said, it's an HMO model. Somebody was getting the monthly cap. So we thought, well, we would add primary care. So now we have primary care. The woman comes in pregnant, we get the baby, she delivers, the grandma brings the baby, decides, oh, I want to come to your primary care to see me. So we now also get the grandma. And so it's really about the menu of services that you can provide for your patient. They feel at home, they know your staff, they know your processes, they trust you already. So when you tell them to do something else, they do that. Even in the services I provide as in family planning, we don't only do tubal ligation, IUD, issue when we're doing issue. We now do vasectomies. So when a woman is pregnant and she's worried about how she's gonna have her pregnancy, and she doesn't want to get her tubes done, we said, hey, he can get a vasectomy, and you take less than 30 minutes in our office. It's outpatient. We give him a little Tylenol. So conceptually, we're basically saying that once you come into our office, we will provide as much primary care for you as possible, and we will recommend who you go to. So that's really one of our models. And as I said in the chart, I think any one of us who's been an older practitioner will be more than happy to talk to any of our colleagues one-on-one, because there are some questions you can ask, whether about leasing. Yes, you need to get an expert, but you need to have a little primer to know, okay, here are the basics, and these are the things that you're going to need the expert to do for you. Thank you, Enyi.
Very good. Thank you very much. Stanley,
Yes,
I
Dr.
think we're done.
Yeah, Dr. Emero, thank you very much for sharing that. Does anybody have any other last minute questions? I know we're a little over an hour, but this has been a very interesting conversation.
I have some comments I want to make quickly.
Please go ahead.
Okay, just for young doctors who, I don't think this will apply to the older doctors. They already are successful. They know what they're doing. But new people who have just started, there's some tips that are really important that I've learned along the way. One, call your patients on weekends or after hours. So I call the patients who've had a big surgery to make sure they're not bleeding or had a very bad rash. Patients appreciate that very much. You can be the brightest doctor and still fail in private practice. You gotta have the persona. Call them, see how they're doing. A Saturday call to a patient, gosh, they'll never stop fussing about you. It's a tip that you wanna know about. Time. Everybody's rushed now. When you walk for the hospital, they give you the number to see. There's a trick to it sometimes. If you go in the room, pull out a chair and sit down. When you're sitting, it looks like you spend more time, but you really didn't, than just standing over them, talking and rushing out of the room. Just take a seat, sit down. You're spending the same length of time, but they feel, it appears there's an illusion that you spend more time. So little tips like that. I always have goodies for the kids. I have a candy drawer. The children come in, I give them candy, they are always very happy, and then make jokes with them. That is very important, and it's not something they teach us in medical school.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with that. I think in my own, I'm a plastic surgeon in Atlanta, and my patients love when I call them after hours or weekends, holidays. They can't stop talking about me for doing that. There was a comment about adding mid-levels in your practice. I think one of my friends taught me the only way to really achieve success is to multiply yourself. You can only see one patient at a time, but incorporating a nurse practitioner and a PA into your practice almost triples your time. Personally, I have 2 PAs in my practice, and there's no way I could run a successful plastic surgery practice without having. Can you mute yourself? And while I'm in surgery, they can be doing pre-ops, post-op, and other things.
You can go.
Yes, Dr. Soromi, you want to make a comment? Go ahead. That will be our last comment, unless if you have something else is bugging. Dr. Soromi.
Yeah, Stanley, thank you. I just wanted to say on behalf of Nightlife Pediatrics that I'd like to thank Stanley really and Mr. Kanu, because during the pandemic, I was sitting there just listening to a lot of their business lectures and stuff from ANPA. And that has actually helped quite a bit. It helped Nightlight Pediatrics, even in terms of, the PPP and all those things. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you guys for what you do with ANPA. It's quite helpful. You guys might not think it is, but it helped even a company like Nightlight. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you guys for what you do.
Thank you very much. Next month, we are going to be exploring investments in medical practices and hospitals and medical institutions in Nigeria. We have a successful hospital in Abuja who is going live. Dr. Wada spoke to us last month. I don't know if Dr. Wada is online or not, but we are going to be talking about international investments, specifically in Nigeria and maybe in other countries as well. It has been the ultimate honor and privilege to host this webinars, and I would like to thank Eni for all of his guidance and professionalism and experts that he brings to us. I would also like to thank our national president, Dr. Chris Okunseri, for providing the avenue for us to do this. And of course, all of the panelists and everybody that have contributed to the success of this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. See you guys next month, first Saturday of every month at 12 noon. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Stanley.